Hey people, it is Thursday, April the 18th. The time is 4:09 in the afternoon. It's currently a fairly mild 15 degrees Celsius. And I am on Carlton Street on the east side of downtown Toronto. And we started off with a Toronto honk. And there's a look to the west towards the heart of downtown. So I'm just a bit east of Sherbourne Street here on Carlton, and I'm going to walk over to Parliament Street. This is the West Cabbagetown neighborhood that we're currently walking through, but I'm going to make my way up into St. Jamestown, and we'll take a walk around that neighborhood. St. Jamestown is often regarded as the most densely populated neighborhood in all of Canada, and one of the most densely populated in North America. And I'll talk more about that neighborhood once we get there. And I always like admiring the old townhouses here along Carlton Street, as well as nearby Wellesley Street, and most other streets in this part of the city really have loads of these beautiful historic townhomes. Some are in rougher shape than others. And the St. Jamestown neighborhood we'll be heading to was also once full of old similar homes, as it was considered part of Cabbagetown at one time. And as you can see now, it looks nothing like this, other than a few leftover buildings here and there. And the leaves still haven't sprung on the trees yet, although I think it's very imminent. I can see buds on many of the trees now, and the beginnings of some greenery here. And things get a bit more commercial now as we approach Parliament Street. Parliament Street is a commercial strip. It serves as the main shopping street for the Cabbagetown neighborhood. And it's really the last commercial strip on the east side of downtown. There's a look south down Parliament. We're going to be heading north. And there you can catch a glimpse of the high-rise buildings up ahead, which is the St. Jamestown neighborhood. It's a great old bank building there. And it's still being used as the bank that it was built to be used for. It's a bit of a rarity these days. Fairly lively, as it usually is here on Parliament Street.
Yeah, because I don't know how old it is.
Looks like that cube truck got bombed. And there's a fantastic old row. Looks like it's getting a rehab of sorts. And it'll take you into the heart of old Cabbagetown, the more easterly part of the neighborhood, and probably the nicest and most well-known part of Cabbagetown. And you can see all these old slab apartment buildings that make up St. Jamestown. Old Victorian housing was all demolished and cleared out to make way for this high-rise neighborhood in the 1960s. Began in the 1950s, I believe, and continued developing throughout the 60s. Another charming old row. And we're approaching Wellesley Street. So I think I'll cross here. And as I mentioned, this is the most densely populated neighborhood in Canada. But believe it or not, it's becoming more densely populated. Several new towers have been added to the neighborhood in recent years, with plans for additional ones. See this development notice here. Add a much taller tower on some of the underutilized space between the existing buildings. And we'll take a look at a few of the new buildings that have been built in the last several years as we make our way through the neighborhood. So St. Jamestown is made up of 2 census tracts combined together, with a current population of approximately 17,000 officially, but lots of residents who live in the area might be undocumented, and some estimates say that the true population might be in excess of 25,000. And St. Jamestown has a population density of approximately 44,000 people per square kilometer, which might be higher by now. And for Americans watching, that's well in excess of 100,000 people per square mile. Upwards of 115,000 people per square mile. Not exact, just an approximation. As I mentioned, it was first began its redevelopment in the late 1950s, after they cleared out the existing old Victorian-era housing. And mostly complete by the end of the 1960s. It had around 17 high-rise buildings, but a few more, as I mentioned, have been added in more recent years, so I think there's around 20 buildings. All right, let's head into the neighborhood here. And this was originally proposed to be a high-rise community for urban professionals who wanted to live close to their downtown jobs. And it was marketed as such. But during that period in the 1960s, suburbanization was also very popular. And the surrounding boroughs of North York and Scarborough and Etobicoke were booming with new single-family housing developments, so there was lots of competition among young people who would rather live in the suburbs than live in a downtown apartment. And over time, its original focus started to lose cohesion, and the neighborhood began changing and attracting a more low-income demographic. And the urban professionals who were living here eventually mostly drifted away. And a few additional buildings were added that were public housing buildings as well. So now it's a mix of market rental apartments and public housing. And now condominiums have made inroads into the neighborhood with these newer buildings that have popped up in more recent years. I think the tallest of these old 1960s buildings is around 32 stories. But the more recent builds are more like in the 40-story range or more. And there's still a school in the neighborhood in its original old school building. And this also is a heavily immigrant-dominated neighborhood. I think residents born outside of Canada make up the overwhelming majority of the population. Here's a look at the school building. Rose Avenue Public School. Looks like somebody TP'd the tree here in front of the building. I wonder if that's left over from Halloween. And you can see behind, in the background, those two more modern looking buildings. Those are the two new condo buildings that were recently built. As I mentioned, they're taller than their 1960s counterparts. And there was also a new rental tower added to the neighborhood. That is a bit taller than the old 60s slab buildings. That's over on Sherbourne. And there's a library in the neighborhood, as well as two full-size grocery stores. And all year round they have this outdoor yard sale. Selling all sorts of different wares. Like Toronto police were coming up inside for something here. The neighborhood has developed a bit of a reputation for crime, unfortunately, and has had several high-profile incidents take place, even just in recent months. But most people who live here are just hardworking immigrants. Let's take a walk through the park. Try not to step in the mud here. You can see some of the shops at the base of the buildings here. Some of the buildings are definitely worse for wear and unpleasant places to live. Other ones are a lot better. It all depends on the building. think I found the pigeon population of St. Jamestown here. There's a better look at those newer condo towers. They definitely stand out from the rest of the buildings. And these buildings are quite massive. The units are actually quite large, and they're solidly built with thick cement walls, very soundproof compared to newer condo buildings. And the rents are cheaper than average for downtown Toronto. If you're looking to rent a unit, you just have to do some research and make sure you know what the building is like that you are interested in. And we'll get a look at the newer rental tower, which is currently the tallest building in the neighborhood. You can see this black, more modern, glassy looking tower beside its older 1960s counterpart. And yes, that is a rental. I think it will soon be overtaken by an under construction building just up the street. And you can see up ahead a building rising with a tower crane. That's the newest addition to the neighborhood, and I believe that is also a condo tower. And that will be about 50 stories, so it'll be by far the tallest building in the neighborhood. Within the boundaries of St. Jamestown, just across the street, there are some tall buildings around the same height, but they don't lie within the St. Jamestown boundaries officially, as I believe this one does. So the next block over is Sherbourne Street. That's the western boundary of the neighborhood. And I think these shorter apartment buildings here that you see with the blue and gray color scheme, I think they were among the first ones built in the neighborhood in the late 1950s. And they're named after Canadian provinces, I believe, which a number of the buildings in the neighborhood are named after. Some of the buildings are getting some work done. Balconies being replaced and that sort of thing. Sprucing up the exterior. There have been a number of major fires also in recent years in some of the older buildings. that have displaced residents for as much as a year afterwards, until the building was ready to be rehabitated, if that's a word. So this building is actually named after a Canadian city, the Hamilton, which is a neighboring city to Toronto. You can see some of the towers looking west. And those tall buildings are all outside of the St. Jamestown neighborhood boundary. But this lot you see right here will be the site of a new tower as well, of around 50 stories, to join its rising soon-to-be neighbor here. We're approaching Howard Street, which is a more old-school street from how much of the neighborhood used to look. Howard Street was spared from being completely redeveloped. And it still retains its old Victorian heritage buildings and a small strip of stores and restaurants. Quite like this little stretch here, actually. So if we go back 100 years, much of the neighborhood looked more like this. And some nice old walk-up apartment buildings. Hopefully nothing ever comes of these. They should be retained at all cost. Some more heritage homes there. These are rehabilitated about 10 years ago. They were pretty run down then, all boarded up. And that's Bloor Street, you can see looking north. And there's an entrance to Sherbourne subway station just at the end of the street. Now we're getting closer to that newer condo building and its neighbor. And at one time, this is quite a grand residence, I'm sure. It's like a semi-detached mansion of sorts. I'm not sure if any of these buildings are named after provinces after all. Maybe they're all named after cities. We saw the Hamilton. And I see this building here is called the Toronto. Pronouncing it with the hard T. I don't know what I was thinking. The Toronto. There you go. I don't think I ever noticed that that building was called the Toronto before. And now that I think about it, I think one of these first original buildings is called the St. John's, after the capital city of Newfoundland. church. Fairly new looking neighborhood playground. Dr. Gordon Chong Park. All right, let's cut through here. Go down to Bloor Street. I guess I should say up since we're walking north. And here's Bloor Street East. Yeah, we get a close-up look at these new buildings with some recently opened retail at the base, which is good to see. And hopefully more to come. There's a few available spaces here still. But I think I'm going to wrap up the walk here. So I hope you enjoyed the tour of St. Jamestown, Canada's most densely populated neighborhood, and getting denser by the looks of it with all these newer towers. So I hope you enjoyed the walk. So leave a comment down below letting me know if you did or didn't, or anything else you might have to say. And be sure to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already done so, and also make sure you hit the notification bell. That way you won't miss any of my videos. And if you'd like to support the channel, there are links in the description where you can do so via PayPal, as well as via my merch store. Or you can also support the channel by becoming a channel member, or by sending a super thanks if you prefer. And you can find me on Instagram under KContinuum. So thanks for watching, and thanks to all the channel members. And be sure to keep checking back, because, as always, I will continue.